Manifested truth by fact and also by the heart. You see what I'm saying? So this is what you see the Creator coming together as one.
King, as we were saying, brothers and sisters, what they're referring to, brothers and sisters, as what we just read, those 42 principles of Ma'at and everything, they trying to say that the Torah comes out of that. But in the Torah, there's a Sabbath. In the Torah, there's a prohibition against homosexuality. There's a prohibition against idolatry. That doesn't exist in the culture of Ma'at. Leviticus chapter 11 gives the nation of Israel a diet. You're not supposed to eat any sea creatures that don't have fins and scales. So therefore, shrimps, crabs, lobsters, mackerel, and so forth and so on, certain of those kind of sea creatures we don't eat. We have a diet that's secluded basically to the house of Israel. See, so let that be noted and understood. Now, in Dr. Ben's book entitled Black Theology Without Black Philosophy, the author of that book tried to sit there and state that the Ten Commandments came out of the principles of Ma'at. But then when you show the list of it, as the brother is showing you the diagram now that Dr. Ben has, he has to admit that there is nothing in there that says anything about a Sabbath or prohibition against idols. It distinctly says gods and goddesses. I am the Lord thy God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's Exodus 20. There's no gods and goddesses. It's one God, Yah, the King of heaven and earth. You understand? So let that be noted and understood. Now, there is no Egyptian God that says that they brought people out of the land of bondage. So the whole culture by itself is totally different. So just want to sit there and emphasize and let that point be noted and understood. All right. Now, last time we did on Maccabeestv, we spoke about going more so into the history of Israel. For that, we're going to use different references and of course the scriptures. Now, those who don't care to use the scriptures, that's no offense intended. That's just your problem. We are not going to sit there and bite tongue or cheek and using what our ancestors left on record. All right. So let that be noted and understood. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 21. We're going to not read the whole thing, just a couple of verses out of it, because this is part of the covenant that if Israel were to or not to keep the commandments of the Most High, what will happen? Deuteronomy 28, we're going to start in verse 21. And here is what we read. The Most High shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he has consumed thee from off the land, whether you go in to possess it. Verse 25. The Most High will cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and thou shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Deuteronomy 28, verse 52. And he shall besiege thee at all thy gates, until thy high and fortified walls come down, wherein thou didst trust throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, throughout all thy land which the Most High thy King hath given thee. This is in Deuteronomy the 28th chapter. And we, as stated, starting from verse 21, 25, and 52. Now, the point in doing that aspect is what we're going to now sit there and go into, brothers and sisters. Let's go, if we will, to the book of 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 20. All right? 1 Kings chapter 15, all right, verse 20. And here is what we read. So Ben-Hadad hearkened unto King Asa, and sent captains of the hosts, which he had against the cities of Israel, and smote Aijalon, and Dan, and Abel Beth Maacah, and Kinneret, and all the land of Naphtali. So that just means, when it says he smote them, that he defeated them. He smote them with a blow in reference with war. So now when you're dealing in war, in all nations, they have what they call war captives. So that's how you see some of the scattering of the tribes of Israel with that. Deuteronomy 28, verse 21, distinctly says the Most High will make the pestilence cleave unto you. The pestilence is these other nations, such as the Arameans, such as the Assyrians, such as the Babylonians, such as later on we're going to get into the Greeks and the Romans. These were part of these other nations that was the pestilence to the house of Israel. So let that be noted and understood. All right? If we go, brothers and sisters, to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 10. 2 Kings, chapter 10, verse 31. So we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. And here is what we read right here. It says the following. But Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Most High King of Israel with all his heart. For he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin. In those days, the Most High began to cut Israel short, and Hazael smote them in all the borders of Israel. Hazael was one of the kings that we read of that was of the Arameans. All right, and we also read about Jehu, king of Israel. And here is what we see. All right, from the Jordan eastward, all the land of Galilee, the Gadites and the Reubenites and the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon, to Gilead and unto Bashan. So as the brother's showing you once again, this is a map showing the eastern portion of where Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh was. The pestilence shall cleave unto thee, until thou be consumed from off the land, whether you go in to possess it. The Most High will cause you to be smitten before thine enemies. You shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them. And thy high and fortified walls wherein thou didst trust shall come down. So this is all the prophecies that Moshe or Moses spoke to the house of Israel that we see coming to pass, even while Israel was still in their land. So let that be noted and understood in history. All right, so now continuing on, brothers and sisters, in this kind of presentation, I have a secular reference, if you will. This book is entitled The Bible is History, all right? And it's written by a guy named Ian Wilson. And I'm going to read part of it on page 151. And here is what we read, all right? And it says the following on page 151, all right? And here, brothers and sisters, is what we read. I want this to be seen. This here is a picture of Jehu, king of Israel, bowing down to Shalmaneser III, king of Assyria. So we're not coming with light evidence talking about that there was a people called ancient Israel. All right, we're going into secular references of sorts. But here's something I wanted to read. It says, either way, remember we read in the Bible about Jehu of Israel, right? Jehu of Israel. Either way, Jehu became an Assyrian puppet, whiling out a largely undistinguished reign of some 30 years, during which he at least outlived Shalmaneser. The latest successors then became too preoccupied with problems closer at home to have much interest in him. As further evidence of both the Israel and Judite kingdoms' weakness during his time, the Bible and archaeological findings alike show that peoples neighboring the old Davidic and Solomonic or Solomon Empire took their opportunity to break free and wreak havoc on vengeance on whoever they chose to do so. There is further evidence that many of those time-honored allies, the Phoenician people of Tyre, were forced at this time to quit their city. They moved all the way across the Mediterranean. We're speaking in the era of the 9th century BCE, across the Mediterranean to found Carthage and what is now Tunisia, as well as Thoros in Sardinia. So it says that the people, partly of Israel, went over to found the city of Carthage, which is in Tunisia. So I just want to sit there and have that, brothers and sisters, to be shown as evidence. In this book here, pardon the cover, entitled Hebrewisms of West Africa, here is what we read on page 190, all right? And it says the following, because we want to use a lot of external references to sit there and have our case to be shown from evidence outside of just the scriptures.
Right, and as you're going into that book, I want to say something. There was one particular individual who was going to remain nameless for this interview that said that that book is trash, but yet never told you exactly what's trash about the book. But because he wants to push that Kemetic doctrine so much, and he hates this book because this book cuts them so much, he said the book was trash, man. And I think you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
Now, in this book here, Hebrewisms of West Africa, Vanished Glories of the North, page 190, it says in part, in Africa, The first Jewish graveyards to be noted are those in Carthage, in which Jewish catacombs are recognized. Now, when it says Jewish, we know and understand it's talking about the Hebrews, the Israelites. Now, on page 189 of the same book, it says again, inscriptions indicate that certain tribes of Asher and of Zebulun lived in Carthage ever since the foundation of the city. It's right here, as we see right here. We're speaking of it being founded in the 9th century BCE. So we see, brothers and sisters, know and understand that the children of Israel migrated prior to the time of the Assyrian influx coming upon the house of Israel. So I just want to sit there and let that be noted and understood.
Can I tie a nice sweet bow into that?
Please.
You know what I'm saying? When you read about Carthage later on in history during the time of Hannibal, one of the reasons why you read about Jews being from that area is going back to what the brother's bringing out now. It all ties into a neat bow.
Okay, we're going to now go into 2 Kings 17 verse 1. So we can sit there and move on in our point.
Right.
We're in the book of 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, starting in verse 1. And it says the following. All right. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign over Samaria, and he reigned in Israel 9 years. And he did that which is evil in the sight of the Most High, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, and Hosea became his servant and brought him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, the king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Now when it says So, the king of Egypt, it is not talking about a literal king that had the name of literal So. That was an acronym name. You understand what I'm saying? That was an alias name, if you want to put it like that. This guy's name was actually a king named Shabaka, who was actually the commander of the Egyptian army. So let that be noted. In Hebrew understanding, anytime when someone leaves the army, you would be called the Melech or the Malak or the king. So that's why the Hebrew writings has the king that we understand as Shabaka written as So as the king. So let that be noted. You got to understand the culture of the people to see why it says the king. All right, here is what it's go on to say this. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 9 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan in the cities of the Medes. So now when you go, brothers and sisters, also to 2 Kings chapter 15, if you will, 2 Kings chapter 15 verse 29. And here is what we read in the scriptures, and it says the following. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, and took Ion and Abel-Beth-Maacah, and Yanoach, and Kadesh, and Hazor, and Galaad, and all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria. So Naphtali, Gad, Reuben, Manasseh, they already inside of Assyria. So now we got all the way from the tribe of Issachar down all the way down to the tribe of Ephraim on the west side of the Jordan. And that is what 2 Kings chapter 17 is talking about, when it says the king went up throughout all the land. This being in the year 722, 721 BCE, when the northern kingdom of Israel fell to Sargon, the successor of Shalmaneser V. So let that be noted and understood. Going back to Hebrewisms of West Africa, page 123. All right? And here is what we read concerning this kind of matter. All right? It says the following. This is about the deportation of the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel. Right? And here is what we read. It says this. The lost tribes of Israel, northern kingdom destroyed is the subtitle. It says this. The ultimate destruction of the northern tribes was accomplished a few years later when Sargon II, 721 BCE, completed the work that had been begun by his predecessor Shalmaneser V, finally captured Samaria, which had held out for a 3-year siege. The conqueror thus recorded his triumph by saying, this is from Sargon's record itself, I besieged and captured Samaria. What are you talking about when they sitting up there saying that, oh, you can't show any references from the Bible outside of the Bible? The scriptures, the Israelite record and the Assyrian record is both agreeing that the ancient house of Israel got their butt beat by the Assyrians. See, the ancient Israelites didn't give you a romanticized, oh, we never lost any wars. No, Israel is saying we lost to Assyria. And the God of Israel in Isaiah chapter 10 tells you why. he sent Tiglath-Pileser, Shalmaneser, Sennacherib, and before that Sargon to the house of Israel, because they didn't keep the laws, statutes, and commandments. This is part of that pestilence that cleaved to the house of Israel, because Israel broke the laws of Yah. That's why. So in order to return back to the Most High, we got to keep the laws of Yah, like Deuteronomy 30 says. Ptahhotep's regulations doesn't have a stipulation on how to return back to whatever God they choose to have. Yah, the God of Israel, told you in Deuteronomy 30, if you bethink yourself and return and keep the commandments of Yah, then he will return and gather you from all the places where the Most High God has scattered you. You see, so the Most High didn't leave Israel with a blank. So let that be noted and understood. Now, one of the things to sit there and let it be noted, continuing on, says, I besieged and captured Samaria. I carried away 27,290 of its inhabitants, and I collected their 50 chariots. The remains of them I permitted to retain their goods, put my governors over them, and laid the tribute of former kings upon them. So you still had brothers and sisters to sit there and collaborate in history. This is during the time of King Ahaz of the tribe of Judah, when the northern kingdom of Israel fell. Notice that the king of Assyria said that those who remained, because he didn't take each and every single human being out. It said those that remained, he put the tribute of former kings upon them. When you go in your own time and read the book of 2 Chronicles chapter 30, you read about Hezekiah sent porters out to Manasseh, Ephraim, out to Zebulun, and out to Asher and Issachar to have them come to Jerusalem to keep the Passover. So that shows you Hezekiah was the successor of Ahaz. And we've shown reference about Hezekiah being mentioned by Sennacherib. So all of this history, brothers and sisters, is tying in. This is not something that we just made up just to sound special as a people. You understand? So let that be noted and understood. Now, continuing on, brothers and sisters, if we will, I'd like to now sit there and, brothers and sisters, go, if we will, into a prophetic book of the house of Israel. Okay? Let's go to the book of Daniel, chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7, verse 6. All right? And here is what we read. All right, so we can gain an understanding of what we're about to get into. It says the following. After this I behold, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. And the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. Now, this is talking in history about the Greek Empire. So I just want to sit there and collaborate before we continue on. The Assyrians, we already spoke about them taking the tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel. We spoke in reference in other times about the Babylonians taking the people of the tribe of Judah to Babylon. We spoke about that in Maccabeestv. You understand, in the past. So I just want to sit there and let that have been noted and shown. Now, brothers and sisters, when you go in your own time and you go in the book of 2 Kings chapter 24, you read verses 8 through 12. It speaks about King Jehoiakim being taken captive. And then you read in 2 Kings in your own time. The 25th chapter, you read about Zedekiah being taken captive. So Babylon coming up in the zenith under the king Nebuchadnezzar. You understand? That situation happened. You had Nebuchadnezzar all the way down to the line of the king Nabonidus, mentioned in the scriptures as Belshazzar, the king of Babylon. And that was the king that was ruling when Daniel was a captive in the land of Babylon. So let that be noted. Babylon kingdom coming up 605 BCE and falling, brothers and sisters, to 538 or 539 to Cyrus, king of Persia. So now you had it in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah later on after that, when the Israelites under the edict of Cyrus went over back into the land of Israel and reconstructed their temple. So let that be noted and understood. The second situation that we're speaking on concerning that kind of matter, brothers and sisters, in this recording right here, is that when the Persians came up from the era of 538 BCE, they came from Cyrus, and then after Cyrus you had Darius the first, and after Darius you had Ahasuerus. This is when you now get into the Bible in the book of Esther. So then after the situation of Ahasuerus, you then have the situation that came up when the Persians began to fall to the Greeks in their empire. When you go into the movie 300 with Xerxes battling with the Greeks. So that's the situation in history that happened with that. So the Persians coming up in 538 and falling in 331. When you go into history when Darius III named Commodus when he lost to Alexander, the son of Philip of Macedon. So that's what we're getting into now, culminating the history. Where did the house of Israel or the Israelites fit in the world's history after the Old Testament and before the New Testament? So this is something that we want to sit there and talk about in this kind of presentation right here. Brothers and sisters, the book of Daniel chapter 7 verse 6 says that this beast, which is a leopard, had 4 wings of a fowl and had 4 heads. This is speaking about when Alexander came up as a power. He coming up as a power in the year 332 BCE when he wound up defeating in 332, 331 BCE when he defeated the people of Persia and also defeating the people of Tyre. The people of Tyre, or Tyre, pronounced Tyra by some people, was the people that the Zidonians / Canaanites / tribe of Asher that was still in there, and he took them over into the land of captivity. When you go into a book, a secular reference entitled Alexander of Macedon, written by an author named Green, he gets into that particular subject. So I just want to sit there and let that be noted. The Greek Empire coming up, coming to its zenith, we may say, during the era of Alexander, he is killed all hands down by his missionary or his successor, Cassander. The 4 beasts, the 4 heads on the beast represented 4 different generals that came up. You understand? You had Ptolemy, Lysimachus, Antigonus, and Cassander. So these were the 4 that came up. Antigonus wound up being killed by the other 3 in battle. You understand when you get into history. So now you have the 4 heads being Ptolemy, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Cassander. Cassander actually poisoned or killed, that is, by knife point. History differs on that. Alexander's baby's mother, whose name was Roxana, and Alexander the Fourth being the successor, who would have been the true successor of Alexander, also got killed by Cassander. So let that be noted. Ptolemy the First is now what we're going to get into in history concerning this kind of matter. All right, so I just want to sit there and have that to be noted in history in this presentation that we're doing. All right. Now I have some secular notes I just want to sit there and read briefly through so we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. It says the following: Ptolemy, Antigonus, Cassander, Lysimachus. Antigonus defeated in 301 BCE by Seleucus in what is called the Ipsus battle, IPSUS. Right? Then the notes that I gathered continue to say as follows: Ptolemy had ruled over the house of Israel until 198 BCE, which is referred to between the war called the Punian War between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. All right. Then it goes on to say from 198 to all the way to 63 BCE, the Seleucids were in control over where the house of Israel or where the children of Israel were at that time. In the year 190 BC, Antiochus III lost to Rome and was defeated, that is, by Ptolemy VI. You get into that when you go to 1 Maccabees in the Apocrypha, the 1st chapter. Antiochus IV was his successor, and he was a prisoner of Rome, but he was taken out of Rome and then had hegemony over where the Israelites was at. In the year 164 BCE, Antiochus IV made war against Rome, and when Perseus of Rome won in the year 168 BCE. So now you see Rome and Greece now fighting between themselves, when the Ptolemies and Seleucids were still fighting among themselves, and all of them still having hegemony over where the Israelites were, because as it says in Deuteronomy 28, the Most High will make the pestilence cleave unto you. These are some of these nations, that's the pestilence, until he consume you from off the land where you go in to possess it, and you be scattered among the nations in derision.
Right. If I may say really quickly, not to interrupt you, when you read the book of Daniel, the 11th chapter in the Bible, it goes into great detail about the Seleucid, the Syrian wars. It goes into great detail about that, but you have to know history to be able to understand what it's saying. Go ahead.
Okay, absolutely. Now, the next thing to get into is in the year 169 BC, Antiochus IV made war against Rome. I already read that, pardon me. All right, in 168 BC, Antiochus IV went against the Israelites, and he removed what is referred to as Onias III as a priest. So that right there is very important in history. You get into that when you read in the book called the Apocrypha and Maccabees, as well as in Josephus. Greece eventually lost to Rome, and ultimately in the year 147 BCE, Carthage lost to Rome. That is to say, when Antiochus, I'm getting confused with the names. When the guy Scipio, nicknamed Africanus, defeated Hannibal in what they call the Third Punic War. So let that be noted. Carthage lost to Rome in 146 BCE. Rome, that is to say the Romans fought the battle under Merciless and Sulla against the god Jugurtha in 105 BCE. That becomes important because With the Battle of Jugurtha, you also read in secular history about the people called the Idumea, or the Idumean people. And the Idumean people, hands down, were the people that we call the Edomites. So that right there is something very important to let that be noted and understood, what we're going to get into. Okay? The Maccabees that came up to note was Judah Maccabeus, Eleazar Maccabeus, John Maccabeus, Jonathan Maccabeus, and Simon Maccabeus. These were the 5 sons of Matthias, or King Matthias, that came out of the house of Levi, that were the leaders of the people of the Maccabees, as we went over last time. Judas Maccabeus died in 160 BCE, and then Jonathan Maccabeus died in 142 BCE, and Simon Maccabeus died in 134 BCE. Here's where we're going to now sit there and culminate all the notes together. In the year 140 BCE, Antiochus VI made war against Judah. John Hyrcanus in Judah, which was the sons of Simon Maccabeus. So these are now the nephews of Judas Maccabeus, not to be confused with he himself, defeated Antiochus VI. John Hyrcanus lost to Antiochus VII, but Antiochus VII lost in the battle to the Parthians. When you go into a book entitled Caesar and Christ by Will Durant, he gets into that subject matter that we just spoke about. All right, now let's continue on. The successors of the Israelites leaders at that time was a guy named Aristobulus I, who was the successor of Hyrcanus, and he did his thing in 104 to 103 BCE. Then you had Alexander Jannaeus, the successor of Aristobulus I, and he did his thing from 103 to 76 BCE. Then we have Aristobulus II, the successor of Alexander Jannaeus. And then the Maccabean issue went basically from 143 to 63 BCE. Now, here is the notes, does conclude with that, in that particular subject. I want to sit there and go into this book here. Sorry that the cover's off. I had some violent reading and I was just highlighting and everything else, so that's what happened. The name of this book is entitled Israelites and Jews, The Significant Difference. And this was written by my teacher, Kohen Mikael. Okay, now we're going to go into this book on page 78 and read a particular subject matter concerning this. And here is what we read, all right? It says the following. An Israelite is a descendant of the ancient nation of Israel. A Jew is a member of a religion called Judaism. And when you say Jew, you're talking about the European converts. A Jew is a member of a religion called Judaism, which attempts to practice the laws, traditions, and customs of ancient Israel. So I want to sit there and let that be noted as far as what the distinction is between the Israelites and such. Okay, so let that be noted and understood. In this same book here on page 15 and 16, speaking in reference about what we're about to get into, this comes to be very, very important in our presentation concerning this matter. Same book, Israelites and Jews, A Significant Difference, for external source, page 15, and here is what we read. All right? The historian Philo, from 40 BC to 40 AD, who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, stated that 1 million Hebrews resided in Libya and Egypt, from the Maccabeestv to the border of Ethiopia. E. Shona, in his book, The Lost Tribes of Myth, says the following. There was a period of over 600 years between Zephaniah and Philo, and considering the new waves of immigrants that had coming into Africa, they had 600 years to penetrate toward all the borders of Ethiopia. Hebrewism was detected by its inscriptions from the Egyptian border westward. In this book here entitled Israelites and Jews, The Significant Difference by my teacher, Kohen Mikael. Now we're going to go into page 16 of this book, all right? So we can continue on as we were reading. And here is what it says. It says, the Greek historian and geographer Strabo wrote concerning the Hebrews of Libya. Now these Hebrews already have gotten into all cities, and it is hard to find a place in the habitable earth that have not admitted this tribe of men and is not possessed by it. And it has come to pass that Egypt and Libya, as having the same government, and a great many other nations initiate their way of living. So the author Kohen Mikael is speaking in reference about the house of Israel scattering over into places in what we call the continent of Africa. So I just want to sit there and have that to be noted and shown and understood. If you will, brothers and sisters, let's go in the same book, page 82, so we can gain an understanding concerning this. And for the presentation purposes, once again, I apologize for the cover being off. It comes from putting it back up and down on the shelf, and it got ripped off with all the highlighting and so forth. Now, in this book right here, page 82, we read the following. When the Greeks, pay attention, when the Greeks and Romans invaded the East, the Edomites migrated into Europe and assimilated with other cultures, carrying their acquired Israelite traits with them. I want to sit there and have that to be read, because as we know, brothers and sisters, that we went over in Hebrewisms of West Africa. When you go in your own time and read the book Babylon and Timbuktu, it talks about the situation of the Israelites that migrated into Africa. We spoke in reference about, on my particular YouTube channel, written as Moreh Yeshaya, M-O-R-E-H Yeshaya, Y-E-S-H-I-A-H, called Diaspora of Israel, Part 5, in which I explained the diaspora of Israel with Elephantine Egypt, and so forth and so on. So let that be noted and understood. Okay, so I just wanted to go over where Greek historians, Roman historians, and secular references were speaking about the Israelites migrating into the place that we call Africa today. And then you have it, brothers and sisters, to where J.A. Rogers in his book speaks about West Africa having black Jews. When you go in his book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, page 31, page 33. You understand? So let that be noted and understood. So we citing our sources. We're not just coming, not that we're afraid to, but we're not just coming with this book. Because this book, in the law, in the first 5 books of it, tells us a matter is established by 2 witnesses, or 3. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is how we're going to present our case Torah style. All right, so let that be noted and understood. Now, brothers and sisters, let's go in the last segment of what we're going to be talking about. And we spoke in reference about the Greek Empire, right? I have a book here entitled The History of Ancient Israel, written by Michael Grant. Now, Michael Grant is a well-known historian inside the history world. And I'm going to go, brothers and sisters, to page 225 in this particular book. And here is what we read concerning this kind of matter. All right, it says the following. And here is what it says. Antipater, however, who pursued a policy of active collaboration with the Romans, retained a prominent position. He was put in charge of his native Idumea and received special powers in Jerusalem itself, including tax collecting and rights. Now, what the brother's going to show you right now in the maps comes from a book called the Macmillan Bible Atlas, and it shows you where ancient Edom was and where ancient Edom became by the time the Greeks and Romans came in. They were right underneath where Jerusalem was, because as you go in Ezekiel chapter 35 and Ezekiel 36, the Edomites always wanted possession of the land of Israel. So let that be noted and understood. In this same book here, we're going to now sit there and go into a page. Let's go, brothers and sisters, into page 228. What we're getting into now is getting into the issue of what happened with the Romans. Because now Greece fell. When Greece fell as an empire from 331 to 168, and then later on finally culminating in 146 BCE. Okay? You had it to then when Rome came up as a power. What we're speaking about now is Antipater, who was the friend, brothers and sisters, of the guy that we call Pompey. Pompey in year 63 BCE made Judah or Judea or Iudea, that is to say, a Roman province. So let that be noted and understood. So the Edomites and the Romans had a collaboration. The Edomites were then called the Idumeans. And let's see what happened with the true Israelites during this situation. Okay, here is what it says in this particular part here. It says, Herod made his way to Rome when he met Antony, that is to say Mark Antony, who had divided up the empire with Octavian, securing the eastern province as his own. Antony prompted the Roman government and made a treaty with Herod and sent him back to Judea, not as a prince, but as a king. So here we now see, brothers and sisters, Herod, who was the son of Antipater. This is the same Herod the Great that you read of in Matthew in the New Testament. You understand? So I just want to sit there and let this be noted and understood. So now, when the situation happened when Octavian, who was the successor of Julius Caesar, okay? Then after Octavian, you had Tiberius. You read about Tiberius in the New Testament in Luke chapter 1 and 2. So let that be noted and understood in history. The next situation we're going to then get into is after Tiberius, you had the guy Caligula. And after Caligula, you had the guy Claudius. And after Claudius, you had the guy Nero. And after Nero, he sent out his soldier named Vespasian to attack Jotapata in Samaria and Jericho. And that being culminated in the year 67 to 69 AD. So let that be noted. After Julius, this book here, The History of Ancient Israel by Michael Grant, we're going to now go into page 241. After urging surrender in vain, Titus pressed on with the siege. In spite of fanatical resistance, he succeeded in capturing the temple, which was totally consumed by flames. After an existence of 600 years, the second temple has ceased to exist, and it has never since then been built. Elsewhere in Jerusalem, however, the Hebrew resistant groups, altogether weakened by famine, continue to hold out, while Titus's defense that had lasted for 4.5 months, every part of the city had fallen. As in other parts of Judea, huge numbers of prisoners were taken, destined for execution on starvation or slaughter and gladiatorial shows. So I just want to sit there and have that to have been read. So now, as we were going over the situation of what happened with the people of the Roman Empire, Vespasian was sent out by Nero. Vespasian attacked Jotapata, Samaria, and Jericho, in a place called Gerizim. You understand? And then you have it to where his son and successor named Titus sat there and besieged the people of Jerusalem. And as we see here, the brother is showing what is referred to as the Archer Titus, in which you see them carrying an altar in the menorah back into Rome. And as we know, where it stays at now inside of the Vatican. So, brothers and sisters, this is something to be let it be known and understood. After Titus, continuing on, it's not much subject concerning that. He have his brother Domitian. Domitian got assassinated in 96 AD. All right. Then after Domitian, the Flavian dynasty of Rome was ended. Then you had the guy Nerva, and he imported, that is to say, attacks and made circumcision banned in the house of Israel. The Israelites that was still remaining in the land. So after Nerva, you had Trajan, and after Trajan, you had Hadrian. And this is when we're going to get now into this book here, reading very few parts of it, on page 279. This book here is entitled Hadrian, written by Anthony Everett, on page 279. And here is what we read concerning this kind of matter right here. All right, it says the following. Since the devastation that followed Titus's capture of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the ruined and depopulated province had hardly recovered. Jewish security became localized into villages. The high priestly families that had dominated Judea disappeared from history. The Sanhedrin, ancient Israel's Supreme Court, ceased operations, and the old upper class vanished. So I just want to sit there and have that to be read. So now by the time you get to the era of Hadrian, you had it to where he named the land of Israel, or that is to say particularly the land of Jerusalem, into what is referred to as Alia Capitolina, and dedicated that to the Roman god Jupiter. So now, culminating all of this into what we're talking about. Assyria comes up, okay? Takes Israel captive, the tribes there. Babylon then comes up after Assyria. Beats down the southern kingdom of Judah. Assyria is then also vanished as a kingdom. Because the Most High said, whoever oppresses Israel, the Most High will cut them off from the earth. This is why we don't see no Babylonians and Assyrians today. Okay, so let that be noted. And just as those kingdoms fell, so will this kingdom fall. So now, getting back into the situation, we now sit there and we get into the subject matter of what's going on later on with the Medes and the Persians. We spoke about Cyrus. We're culminating in this conclusion right now. You see what I'm saying? So after Cyrus, you had it to where the Persian Empire fell when Darius III lost to Alexander. We went over the successes of Alexander. And then after the situation that happened with the battle between the Romans and Perseus, Rome then becomes a power over Greece, 168, and finally culminating at 147 BCE. Then Rome comes up as a power in that, and then you have it to the situation where Pompey had the situation in his hegemony over the tribes of Israel. So now you had Edomites that was aligned with the Romans. And I wanted to sit there and discuss that particular matter, because you had it to where Augustus was friends with Antipater, Caligula was friends with Agrippa II, and Claudius was also a friends with Agrippa. And when you go into a secular book entitled The Oxford History of Rome, you will sit there and see where Claudius made the Israelites go into captivity and sat there and gave cities of the Israelites like Lebanon and other portions to the people of the Edomites. So that right there is just something to want to sit there and let that be known and shown in history. In the Style Showtime show that I did back in January, somebody from the Amin Ra squad decided to call in and say, where was King Solomon's temple? It was destroyed. So let that be noted. Then the next question is, what happened with the Israelites? You have to know the Roman Empire in depth to know when Hadrian in 135 said none of the Israelites could come back in the land. So that's how you see Israelites migrating, as Kohen Mikael pointed out in the book I read. In the book I read entitled Israelites and Jews, The Significant Difference. So when the Israelites minded up migrating over further west into Western Africa, here is now when we get into another secular source. This book is entitled The Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa. We're going to go and read just a couple of lines. This is on page 57, and here is what we read concerning this matter right here. Edward Morrell, in his Affairs of West Africa, which is a book, informs us that the Fulani and related West Africans are the lineal descendants of the Hyksos and other related Hebrew migrants. Williams says in his book, Hebrewisms of West Africa, the gradual migration of the Israelites is perhaps the simplest, if not the only plausible explanation for finding a black Hebrew culture in West Africa and in the Bantu country in the southern half of the continent. These conclusions in turn are affirmed by the fact that the scholars report that the ancestors of the Fulani, Ashanti, Ewe, Bantu, Yoruba, and other ethnic groups traveled the very same migration patterns. This is coming out of this book entitled The Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa. They migrated into those lands when the Greeks and Romans came in and Israel fled to Western Africa. The book in the Bible to collaborate in the scriptures, Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 10 to 14. It said the Most High will gather Israel from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. The brother is showing a map of the rivers of Ethiopia being the blue and the white Nile. The blue and the white Nile, brothers and sisters, if you were Israel scattered beyond that, that means you're going further west. This is how you know biblically Israelites migrated to Western Africa. So let that be noted and understood. Now, brothers and sisters, we know good and well in history what happened to many of the people that was in West Africa. All right? Now, to sit there and get into a secular source, if you will, to conclude this particular part, I have a book here entitled Stand the Storm. This is written by Edward Reynolds. And on page, this is now, yes, concerning the slave trade. This is now going into what we call on page 29. And here is what he says concerning the slave trade itself. African societies rarely sold their own people. I want this to be understood. African societies rarely sold their own people or those who were culturally close to them. Rather, they sold foreigners obtained from distant areas through trading networks and markets. So this author right here is showing that indigenous Africans did not sell their own people. And when you go and speak to people in Africa, like a reporter did back in the day, it said, well, why did you sell your own people? We didn't sell our own people. We sold the people that we captured in war that came from a foreign land. All black people on earth are not all the same. The Israelites were the ones that were sold and taken into captivity. So that's something to let it be noted and understood. All right, so let that be noted in that particular aspect. Brothers and sisters, I have a book here entitled Black Cargoes. Now, in this particular book right here, right, we're going to sit there and go, brothers and sisters, in page 56 of this book and go into a particular aspect concerning this kind of matter right here, right? In the West Indies, where Basel Negroes were cheap, these considerations were not of prime importance, but the Virginia colonists had to repurchase their Negro slaves from the West Indies in the early days, and hence a Negro represented a considerable investment. So we read right here in Deuteronomy 28, collaborating with the history, the Most High said you would become a proverb, a byword, a sign and a wonder among the nations where the Most High will scatter you. So when Israel was scattered over after the Greco-Roman hegemony over them to the western portion of Africa, as we went biblically and external sources, we particularly see that African people did not sell their own people. And now, getting back into the same book, we only got 2 more quotes. And then here we go into this. And this is a killer right here. As far as you know, this particular stance is right here. Right? I want to sit there and have this to be read and known and understood. In this book right here on page 53, it says this. Although the numbers per ton, meaning per slave ship, right, was higher on vessels of less than 149 tons than on ships of greater size, they all experienced a similar death rate. The time span of the voyage and the danger of resulting contagious disease probably had more effect on the mortality than overcrowding. Thus, the distances from Africa to the New World were pertinent. From the Gambia to the West Indies was 3,200 miles. Now, I want to sit there and explain something. In your own time, you can look up a thing called the Periplus of Hanno, written and spelled as Periplus of Hanno, Hanno. In there, he speaks about the people of Carthage going to the Gambia and migration. The Periplus of Hanno, where the Carthaginians went to the Gambia in migration. We just read in this book here that the people from the Gambia was taken to the West Indies. Prior to that, we read in here that the people in the West Indies were then resold to the people in Virginia. So here we go, collaborating on from this book right here, entitled The Bible is History. Remember we read about the people of the Carthaginians and Hebrewisms of West Africa being of the tribe of Asher and Zebulun in certain cases. From the land of Israel to, as the brother is showing with the map, from the land of Israel to the land called Carthage. From the land of Carthage to the Gambia. From the Gambia to the West Indies. From the West Indies to Virginia. That's one breakdown, basically about how we can show we the tribes of Israel. So, with that being concluded, I hope everything was understood and giving thanks and honor to the Creator and the Maker, Yah, of heaven and earth. And there are, as you might have seen, more books for reference purposes, but maybe I overdid it, bringing too much. All right, you know what I'm saying? But just want to sit there and just show that we, the house of Israel, blessed be Yah, it says in Torah, a matter is established by 2 or 3 witnesses. We have over 8 books that we shown in references, and the Bible wasn't used as much.